spaces, and we are going to start with the Parthenon. A little bit of history about the Parthenon. It was built by an architect named Pericles, and Pericles was sort of the overseer of all of the buildings that were built on the Acropolis that the Parthenon is found on. And the Acropolis is something that was found in most Greek cities. It's kind of like the main place where like important temples are found. So this Acropolis was built after the Persian War, and after the Acropolis that was there before it was burnt down by the Persians. And this Acropolis was sort of built as like a haha, we beat the Persians, so we're going to build something really amazing. And the Parthenon is the most important building in the Acropolis. It's dedicated to Athena, who is the goddess of wisdom, courage, and warfare. So now we're going to take a little virtual tour of the Parthenon. That's good. Okay. So right here is not the entrance to the Parthenon. This is actually the entrance to the Acropolis. But you can kind of see the layout of the Acropolis, where you would enter the you would enter the Acropolis right here, and then the Parthenon is back here. So now we have a view of the Parthenon, sort of an aerial view. And you can see here the Parthenon looks like all of its proportions are perfect. And that was because one of the functions of the Parthenon was that it was like this artistic masterpiece that was supposed to kind of wow people both in Athens and outside of Athens, which also made the Parthenon sort of a national symbol that other people in Greece associated with Athens and like Athens' amazingness. So these perfect proportions that are seen in the Parthenon, as we get closer, we can kind of see that these proportions weren't really perfect at all. So if you look at these columns here, they look like they're really straight from the outside. But if we get a little closer, you can see that they kind of go in and out, and they're not all perfectly straight. And we can also see that the spaces between them, there's a bit of a smaller space between these two columns than there is between the rest of the columns. And that's because if everything in the Parthenon was perfectly straight, it would seem like all of the columns were a little bit crooked, and it would seem like this space was bigger. So to account for that and to make the Parthenon visually look perfect, the Greeks, they made everything slightly off to account for those optical illusions. And the person that made this code of proportions was Polykleitos. So this design of the Parthenon was definitely meant to be viewed from the outside. It was meant to kind of amaze people from the outside, and there weren't many people that were allowed on the inside. Common folks weren't allowed to go inside of temples. That was where like the sacred space was. So in contrast to the Pantheon, which we're going to talk about a little later, which was more elaborate and striking on the inside, the Parthenon was definitely more elaborate on the outside.
Okay, the cella was unusually large to accommodate the oversized statue of the sacred Athena. This also caused the front and the back porch to be a little smaller than usual. The name Parthenon most likely stems from Athena Parthenos, which was a sacred sculpture inside of the Parthenon. The placement of the columns behind the statue was an unusual development since in previous Doric temples they only appeared on the flanks, but the greater width and length of the Parthenon allowed for a dramatic backdrop of double-decked columns instead of a wall. The Parthenon has a mix of Doric and Ionic elements. The Ionic columns near Athena and the continuous frieze on the exterior wall of the cella was very rare during this time period. The two orders may have been used to indicate the importance of the building. The balance between the two orders shows the delicacy, but also shows the simplicity that the Greeks really valued. They also used limestone rock as a medium to build the parts of the building. They used it because it was a very sacred rock during the time.
So some other features of the Parthenon that make it sacred is that it was converted to a church during the last decade of the 6th century AD, and even became an important Christian pilgrimage center in the Eastern Roman Empire. And the monumental temple was also converted to a mosque by the Ottomans toward the end of the 15th century, and almost 200 years later, in 1687, the Parthenon was used as a gunpowder store by the Turkish army, and Venetian forces ended up blowing up the site, which caused a lot of significant damage to the building and even started a fire that destroyed many nearby habitats. And in the next scene, you can see a lot of the reconstruction that's going on due to all the damage that's happened over the last few years. So now we're going to talk about the Pantheon, and it's important to note that this is not the original one. There were two others that were both built before, and they were both destroyed. One in a fire, and the other one with a lightning strike in 27 BC and 125 BC. So there are two important parts to the exterior. The porch is built in a classical Greek style, and it suggests that it was a temple because of the pediments. And right below the pediment, you can see is written Ma Agrippa LF Costervim Fecit, which loosely translates to Marcus Agrippa, son of Lucius, consul for the third time, built this. So this is a reference to the builder of the original Pantheon that was built in the 1st century AD. And there's also a smaller inscription underneath, which means with every refinement they restore the Pantheon worn by age. As you can see, the pediment is now empty, and you might also be able to see some holes in it. And those suggest that there was originally an emblem, which may have been an eagle made out of gilded bronze to symbolize Jupiter. And the monolithic column shafts are made out of gray granite, and the bases and capitals are made out of white Pentelic marble. Pentelic marble comes from the quarries at Penteli, which is north of Athens, and it was used for most of the major monuments of classical Athens, especially from the 5th century BC onwards, and it was the first white marble to be used in significant quantities at Rome in the 2nd century BC. In the Roman period, it is used for architectural elements such like statuary and sarcophagi, and the entire building was faced with Pentelic marble, and there are reliefs showing objects used in religious sacrifices such as dishes, boxes, axes, garlands, and candelabras. And if you look at the interior of the porch, they actually have 4 rose pink columns that are all made out of marble.
Okay, so the main part of the building is, in this view, it's in the back, and this part is a cylindrical shape, but it has a dome on the top that you can't really see in this view, so we will look at a different view. This view, you can see the cylinder a lot more. You still can't see the dome on the top, but we have another picture that we're going to look at that'll show the dome a lot more. This part of the building is Roman in style instead of Greek. So there's no columns involved. It's just kind of like a straight slab. And showing that it's Roman in style, this whole part is made out of concrete, which was a Roman invention and a really important part of Roman architecture. So this part of the building is reminiscent of the architecture of the Roman baths, and the Roman baths were part of day-to-day life in Rome. They were not only a place to take care of your personal hygiene, but they were also a community gathering place where people would go to take baths, and they would also go there to exercise and meet with people in their communities. The building is the part that is right here is made out of brick and concrete. So on the outside, you can kind of see that brick part. And then it was originally faced with white marble stucco, which you can kind of see. Which you can kind of see up here. The white still remains a little bit.
The interior of the Pantheon was made to outshine the exterior. The circular part of the Pantheon has two bronze doors. It also has a perfect hemisphere with an opening to the sky with a bronze sheet frieze. The oculus, which is the only source of light in the building, is a round opening of the ceiling. This may have represented the heavens or going to the heavens. The dome is made from a light tufa and scoria with 5 rings of 28 coffers, with reduce in the center as they go closer to the center of the dome. Originally, this was covered in bronze sheets. The wall of the rotunda has 7 alcoves that are alternatively semicircular and rectangular. The alcove reaches the ceiling. There are also purple and yellow marble columns throughout the building. There are 3 niches for statues. There's also a small window, actually, somewhere in the building. There's square patterns all over the walls, and also throughout the building there's just a whole bunch of squares. The floor was created slightly slanted to allow the runoff for the rainfall. This monument is also home to the monumental tombs, which are located inside the walls. These tombs hold important people such as Raphael, Vittorio, Emmanuel, and Umberto. If you walk into the Pantheon today, you will immediately see an altar because it is now used for Christian purposes. And yeah.
So the Pantheon was completed in 125 CE in the reign of Emperor Hadrian, who was the 14th emperor of Rome, and he was also known as the third of the 5 good emperors. And he was best known for his building projects in the Roman Empire, and he also rebuilt the Pantheon. And on the left side, you can see Marcus Agrippa, whose name was the one alluded to in the inscription.
So the paintings in the Great Hall of the Bulls were visited for ceremonial purposes. These paintings were not just any ordinary paintings. They weren't just depicting what was around the people who painted them. They were more of a beckoning to these animals that they were painting to bring a fertile crop or bring something that they wanted. So it was almost sort of a way of praying, although we don't know that they prayed, and we can't really say that for sure. most likely they were trying to induce fertility out of these animals by painting them, so it was sort of a shamanistic endeavor. The caves are referred to as parietal art, which is art that is painted on the walls of caves. But they actually fall into the category of mobiliary art because the cave had small movable sculpted objects that were usually found in habitation sites, and they were placed in the hall as still as a way to create fertility and stuff like that. The painter of the Great Hall of the Bulls makes reference to another work of art which is called the Crossed Bison, which was made earlier than this work. But as I just said, painter is not really correct because the Great Hall of the Bulls was painted by many, many different artists, and all of these different artists had the same goal, which was to ensure that animals would flourish on the land and that people had a successful hunt. So these paintings were created by different generations of people and likely different species of people over time. The caves were revisited over and over again, all with the same goal of encouraging fertility.
In the Great Hall of Bulls, there are many different painted animals. Some examples of these animals would be horses, bisons, deers, wolves, bears, and lions. They're depicted in the hall, both predators and prey. There's no type of vegetation at all anywhere on the walls. The animals were sacred because they symbolize their only form of survival. Their vitality was accomplished from broad rhythmic outlines around areas of soft colors. Animals on the walls were shown in motion in the paintings. Also, these animals were very alert and energetic in their stance. One of the most famous paintings are the 4 Great Bulls. A theory suggests that the prehistoric people who used the cave may have believed that a way to overpower their prey involved drawing or painting them during rituals to ensure a successful hunt, because survival was entirely dependent on successful hunting.